Welcome to another episode of War Hero to Superhero, helping military veterans and first responders transform their lives from the prayer room to the boardroom. We are back in a place that we have not been in a long time. We've been interviewing some amazing guests in the superhero battle room, but we are visiting the bedroom because we do cover from the prayer room to the bedroom. Even if I'm pixelated or not, we will go over and cover the bedroom. So if I fade out, the content's most important. We have a special guest 4-part series, which is a unique blessing. And we're going to bring her on stage because she has an amazing message. Shiloh is a woman that transformed her marriage on her own. I've not heard that before. Been in the marriage space for years and everything else. And I'm like, on your own? Okay, we got to go over and talk. And she wants to empower you to do the same. So I'm going to bring her forward and we're going to go dive into part 1 of a 4-part series. So don't miss out. Don't go think it's all one episode. It's not over. So we're going to bring her in. Hey, Shiloh, have you live?
I'm here.
All right. So solving your marriage on your own. Man, that's like pulling by the bootstraps. That's usually the military mentality. We try to solve everything on our own. I bet you the ladies and gentlemen are like, yeah, I can pull myself my bootstraps. So, but let's get into a little of the backstory. What was the before? Because we don't know if your marriage was good, bad, and in between. And we want to know if we can go over, do we need to make that change?
Well, thanks for asking. So I had the typical looks good on paper marriage. You know, my husband is a good man. He's hardworking. He's loyal. We had 2 little tiny boys, a home, the cars. We were living what looked like a really great life. There was no addiction or infidelity going on. But I was very, very unhappy. I was lonely. I was miserable. I was exhausted. And I couldn't seem to be able to communicate that to my husband in such a way that I could get what I needed in the relationship. It was the kind of thing where we were just roommates. And, I often think I got along better with my roommates. I used to live with women when I was in grad school and college, and we would, collaborate, cooperate, have a great time together. So roommates weren't so bad, but now we were these roommates who weren't getting along and who were bickering over every detail, and there was just no affection. And for me, it was absolutely excruciating. I couldn't stand that type of relationship. However, when I would bring stuff up to him, he would say, like, well, we have little kids. This is kind of what happens at this stage of marriage. And he did not experience it the same way I did.
Yeah, I would say that's huge in that particular regard. We tend to men and women to be polarized in there. I mean, if he was focused on work and he's like, "Oh, my battle rhythm and I saw as a kid, I saw the same thing." So maybe it was from that perspective. But it's so funny that you can be 12 inches away and be 12 miles apart. So you were 12 miles apart. He's thinking 12 inches outside the conflicts. Why did the before need to change? You said it was excruciating, but that can sometimes be subjective. And I guess in some marriages, we kind of minimize that, not saying it's right. But why did the before need to change overall?
Well, when I was in my head going, what am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about this? Crying all the time and feeling just dread, getting up in the morning like, oh, another day. I remember thinking, I believe in marriage. I don't ever want to get divorced, right? This is not an option for me. But there was this inner knowing that I would not be able to stay married for 50 years if this is how it felt for 50 years. Like, I just knew that I am not made for that. And you're right. I had seen women in my past who did it, who just were like, marriage is hard, and they just stuck it out. And I had doubts of myself sometimes, like, oh, am I asking for a fairy tale? Is this just how it is? I had no idea. But at the bottom level, there was me knowing myself, and I was someone who'd been interested in love and what makes it last since a teenager. I had wanted deeply to be someone who had a truly passionate marriage and wasn't just like, we're together for the kids. And so my I guess inner wisdom was, I won't be able to tolerate this forever, and I don't want to get a divorce.
I mean, yeah, that's huge. I mean, moral convictions and then dealing with the emotional side, intertwining and everything else. And yeah, I don't think we should be in unnecessary suffering. I hear some people go over and say, hey, I have a new marriage because I have the same spouse, because I've transformed. So getting into that particular side, and again, this is uncommon, read a lot of things in marriage, published a couple books, revamping our marriage book, read tons of things. At the time when we published, it was 86,000 marriage books on Amazon alone. Why did you go over and think, as you were making this transformation, it need to be one-sided? Why did not your husband come over and say, meet the gap in a sense?
It's a really good question because, like you, I had read all these books since I was young and I had paid attention to literature. And I thought everything had to be we do this together, we read the book together, we do the exercises together, we go to therapy together. And that wasn't working. Like it just was not working. And I understand now for several reasons, partly because, um, like you said, what he saw growing up, we were doing better than what he saw growing up. So he's thinking, this ain't that bad. Like we're all right. Um, and I just couldn't get him to the table. I couldn't get him to the table. And so when I hit the wall with all of it, I had this moment where I thought, this is not working what I'm doing. I'm trying to cram him into this box, which I think is the only way to fix a marriage. I'm trying to make him show up. I'm trying to make him have the family meetings. I'm trying to make him do the conversations, and he is not interested. It's actually making things worse. So, what can I do? What can I do on my own to make a difference? And that's how this whole approach emerged. It was out of necessity.
Yeah, I would say when you go over and look at counseling, I look at my audience and everything else and the people I want to go help. My main target is the men. So,
Yeah.
men, if you're listening, I want you to listen to this podcast. But when I look at the demographics, 91% of women, no matter if when I have my micro podcast, rebooting this podcast, doing digital TV across 195 countries, women are usually going over and chasing the charge.
Yep.
So I could see now from the perspective why it had to be a one-sided transformation, being that we need to see the change. So then we want to embrace what the one side brings in. So going into that a little bit, let's discuss the process that brought the transformation. So this is a 4-part series. So if you can briefly describe the 4 parts.
Okay. So, this was me in the dark trying everything. So I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody going, "Oh, do this, this will work." But I was basically trying everything that I learned everywhere I went, things that before in the past I wouldn't have tried. I was trying everything. And but after I figured it out, I distilled this into a 4-part method to make some sense of it, right? So the 4 parts are: number 1, put yourself first; number 2, understand your man; number 3, powerful communication; and number 4, be his lover, not his mother. And today I think we're going to talk about part 1. Is that right?
Yep, that's what we're talking about. We don't want to go mess up the order, because if we do the wrong order, we don't want to go mess up the transformation. So yes, that's what we're talking about, is the first part. So we talked about the first part is putting yourself first. That's probably a very hard topic to wrestle with psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, religious wise, practically, and everything else. So, and I think my personal perspective, I'm not a woman, but evaluating and seeing a lot of women, you see the wife and the mother put themselves typically last. And it's usually like dead last. That's why you see Mother's Day go over as number 3 on the holidays, and dads are like number 13 to 18. I have to go look back at the stats, but we try to elevate the moms on Mother's Day because they don't elevate themselves. Dads usually just go like, I'm going to whip out the car and I'm going to go do whatever. I don't need anything per se. So why putting yourself first for the ladies is most important?
I'm so glad you noticed that, because that's exactly the problem. Is women are hardwired to put themselves last, and then we're also culturally conditioned to put ourselves last, and all the way through our lives we're celebrated for being last. It's like, oh, she's such a good woman, she's such a saint, look at her. And so women are very adaptable. We'll absorb whatever we are told is a good girl thing to do, or being a good woman. And so we just labor under this false hope that if we continue to put ourselves last, that will come back to us. We'll be reciprocated. Our children, our husband will go, oh, look at you. I'm going to elevate you. I'm going to put you first. I'm going to put you first. But that's not human psychology. That's not really the way people work. And so I spend a lot of energy in this first step helping women understand that people treat you the way you treat yourself. That's the first reason you have to put yourself first. And number two, when we get into understanding your man and caring for him and the way he needs to be cared for, you can't do that in a genuinely loving way when you're burnt out, because you're going to resent it. You're like, oh, now I've got to do more stuff for him. Now I got to care how he feels. He doesn't care how I feel. Right. So, in order to be able to enact a powerful transformation in your life and in your marriage, you have to fill your cup. You have to make sure that you have what you need mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, so that then when you go forth and you take risks, you try new things, you forgive or you release resentment, you need the power to do that. And you can't do it unless you choose to put yourself first.
Yeah, there's a spiritual analogy I like to share and utilize the cup as it stays in the fade. We'll see how long it doesn't fade away, but because it's a green screen. So most of us go over and take the cup and we just get pouring everything. We pour into our husbands, pour into our wives, pour into our kids, pour into our business and everything else. And you wonder why we snap when we drive from the boardroom to the bedroom is
Yeah.
because we're empty. We're not, at least I learned that we believe you fill your cup from the prayer room to the boardroom, and then you're overflowing. Because at the end of the day, those boardroom people are not going to be with you at your deathbed. And only the people that were in your living room and in your bedroom, and especially your prayer room, is going to be those people that are going to be with you at the end. So I agree onto what you're saying is that it, for me, that sounds relevant and we need to be doing that more often.
Yeah.
But relationships are different, right? All different types of relationships. The world has morphed and changed massively, massively, massively.
Right.
You have the just dating, all right, hanging out for a while back in front of the house. You have the most recent development, up to 60+% of cohabitation. And then you have like the young married couples, and then you have maybe older married couples, kids, and whatnot. What type of relationships is most effective to apply this model? Because you don't want to be like on the first date. I'm like, I'm putting myself first. I'm like, well, I don't even know what your name is. And you're going over and applying this, and it might be
Right.
too early or it might be too late.
That's a great question. So, this model, the real love method, is based on the universal principles of love and attraction, particularly when you're a woman. So, if I do it with men, occasionally I work with men, I mix things up a little bit because men naturally put themselves first a lot more. Men who are super people pleasers, they need the same message. You need to prioritize yourself more, right? But this ideology, which is that you are your most vibrant and attractive when your cup is full. You are your most honest and loving when you have been genuine about your boundaries, when you've said, no, I can't do this. No, I don't like that. Actually, that's too much for me. People can respect you. And this works dating. This is the whole way. This is the whole way through. This is a template that you set for yourself so that in your life you are not taken advantage of, you are not disrespected, you're not walked on, you're not relegated. So I've had clients who were in second relationships, they'd been divorced and their relationship was kind of hot and cold and they didn't understand why their partner wasn't really pursuing them anymore. And I said, put yourself first, he'll pursue you. Don't chase him around. Don't beg. Don't nag. Put yourself first. And so putting yourself first is not like snobby or haughty, like, "Oh, no, I will never do that." Like, it does not come from that kind of energy or attitude problem. It comes from genuine self-worth. Like, I am important enough to care for. I'm the only one who knows exactly what I need. I'm not, it's very responsible because I don't make it your responsibility to know exactly what I need and do it all. It's like, I'm going to do what I need to do for myself. So then when I show up in any of my relationships, I am at my best. I am my best self. So, to what you said, what kind of relationships? The kind of relationships this works in is one with men who are healthy men. So, if you have a man who's in drug addiction or alcohol addiction, if you have a man who's in porn addiction, if you have a man who is extremely aggressive or volatile, like if he calls you names and he attacks your identity, um, if you have a man who is extremely controlling and doesn't let you do anything you want to do, all of the things I teach will backfire. Basically, it will immediately show the problems in your marriage because he's not going to respond to that. He's more interested in responding to his own trauma, his own dysregulation. And so I always want to say to you women who are like, oh, I've tried all the things and it doesn't work. It doesn't always work. It works most of the time, but when you have a situation where a man has very, very severe trauma, then you end up into a different category of working on your relationship, which, if you choose to stay, is a much longer path because this person has a lot to work through.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I was the person of that path. I was the gaslighter. I've already publicly talked about this. Those things that my wife had to spiritually kick me in the nuts between 2013 to 2014. I think it was 2014 because it was on her birthday, and I was like 7 years disgusting. My cup was disgusting, and it was flowing out. And until the Lord, through her, convicting me and basically pointing out all the junk, and then I had to work through my mess. Yeah, I would agree. Right. If she put herself first, I would go over and get jealous and every those types of things. It's like I was not being a servant. I wasn't being the man that was from the prayer room to the boardroom. I was focusing totally on the boardroom. And if you were messing with my boardroom, then I went over and tried to take control and take reign. So I would agree with you in that particular guard in that place. So I'd say, at least from the gentleman's point of view, sometimes we need a spiritual kick in the nuts. Just start therapy if you don't relate to the spiritual side. Need some moral upbringing. Make sure you do it safely. Make sure you do it wisely. Make sure you get wise counsel and whatnot. But I would totally agree that I think it has to be from a healthy space. I could take that now, but in 2014, in the midst of being homeless and all the other things we're going through, yeah, not the right place and right time. So we talked about the relationships that are most effective with that. Why should the ladies and some of the gentlemen clients you do the work? Because again, this is not common. It's either come to counseling and you both work on your stuff together. Yes, you can do your own self work in a sense, but you're pulling yourself by the bootstraps, but you're pulling your marriage by the bootstraps and hoping that they don't go over and snap. So why would I, if it was, let's say, pretend it was me, to go and jump in the work, or the 91% of ladies that are watching?
It's a great question, and it's something that I wrestled with, and I think all my clients wrestle with because it's really an ego burn. It's like it doesn't feel fair, and it's not fair. It doesn't feel right. Like, why do I have to, and all the rest of it. But what I always say is, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. So the only reason you would do this work is because you so strongly desire the type of relationship you desire, and you're not willing to settle for less. So when you're at a crossroads in your marriage and you go, okay, this person's not giving me what I need, and it's not the kind of relationship I want, you have three choices, right? The two that I always heard was you can shut up and put up, be grateful, just be quiet, just stay out of his way, just be like a nice wife. That's just like acceptance and basically give up your dreams. You can leave. You can say, this is not what I want. I'm out of here. Right. And myself and most of the women that I work with and men are like, I don't want that. They're like, yeah, I'm really unhappy with how things are, but I don't want to leave and I don't want to give up on my dreams. So then the third option is really tapping into your deep power and influence as a human being. Like, you can transform your environment by who you are, by gaining better skills, by learning how to talk to people, by learning how to regulate your emotions. And so I always say it has to come from like, you want it bad enough. Like, if you want it bad enough, you're going to do the work.
Yeah, I think that's totally key, is to go over and do that, because I'd say, at least from the men, just even from a clothes example, if you change like the earrings and the hair and everything else, we might not know how to process what you're wearing and to give the compliments you're looking for, but we notice. We notice the things that you go over and do in the hair and everything. We might not have the words to be like, oh, the curls are so flowing and evanescent. And yes, it needs to be at this part. Oh, humidity is going to be outside. Yeah, I'm the weird man that can see those things, but most of us don't. But we do start sensing a notice. It takes a little longer. So I would agree. It's like there is a difference even in tonality and how speaking and everything else. So encouraging the work is really key. But let's go into the difference, because this is probably one of the most polarizing questions that we came together and thought about in the backstage and everything else, is how do you now tell the difference? Because, and again, most of your clients are women, and I would say this is where it resonates with, between selfishness and then putting yourself first. Because I know from my wife's perspective, when we had 4 little ones and we had them all in succession, it was very hard to put yourself first. And then if you're going and doing those things, the kids are clinging at you. The husband's like, where are you going? And blah, 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 if it's taking out. So how do you determine the difference between selfishness and then putting yourself first?
I love this question because this is something that I wrestle with, that every single woman I know wrestles with. Because again, we want everybody else to be happy. We take responsibility for everybody else's feelings like more than we should. So again, if the kids are upset when we leave, if our husband's like inconvenienced when we leave, we're like, oh God, like we feel guilt and stuff like that. So the way that I describe it to women, and I think this really makes it clear, is that think about the way you care for your kids, right? You love your kids, you value them, and you not only love them emotionally and like them and feed them, but you want every aspect of their life to be in order. So you want them to get their social needs met, you want them their intellectual stimulation, you want to get them to get some exercise. You are always thinking about this whole wheel of life and every little part you're like optimizing for them, right? And you know you can't always do it. You notice when you can't, you're like, they haven't had enough exercise today, or like, oh, they're not getting challenged at school. You go out of your way to try to provide for them all these things. Now, that's love. Like that's true love in action, right? When you look at how you treat yourself, it's like, I don't need to eat. I'll have toast. I haven't exercised today, but there's no time. The house is a mess. I have friends, but I can't see them because I got kids and that's how it is. Right? You see how quickly we dismiss what we acknowledge as genuine human needs in our children? We have not changed. We still have all those needs and they still really, really matter. And so, what you want to look at is getting to know yourself well and understanding you as a person. What are these basic needs for you, right? So, for me, I'm extroverted. I need to see my friends. If I just tell myself there's too much to be done and don't see my friends, my attitude will deteriorate. My capacity for patience will go away. My genuine need is not being met. If you're an really introverted woman and you've got 4 kids, you need to find a way to get time to yourself. Now, again, there's ways to communicate that to your husband that are more effective, but prioritizing that even when it's uncomfortable is you showing yourself the love that you need to perform, to be happy, to receive love from others. And so we're being selfish when it comes from an attitude place of entitlement. So there is also some women who you might call the princess archetype, where they think that people should know how to treat them and we shouldn't have to ask. That's more of the immaturity that we bring as women, in our immature feminine essence, is like, why do I have to communicate this? It should already be obvious. You should treat me nice, you should give me this, you should give me compliments. And truly, that is, I would call it more self-centered than selfish, which means you're assuming everybody else thinks the way you do. And they don't, right? And like you commented, men will often notice things but not communicate them. They have a different way of processing than women. And so putting yourself first is loving yourself the way you'd love your own child. And selfishness is when you think the world revolves around you and everybody thinks the way you do.
I'd like to unpack that a little bit because that is such beauty. And that I think that's the essence of putting yourself first in that message. But here's, I think, the systemic problem. And I want you to unpack this. This was not a planned question, but we have putting yourself first and selfishness. We live in a society of service that basically gives us what we want. We have parents now that anticipate needs and get things up and rolling. And now you're 25, 35, 45. You're either going over and getting into a serious relationship, you're cohabitating and getting married, wherever the status of it is in that particular regard. And you have this framework built in. Some people's beliefs spiritually is that we're rooted in selfishness, in the flesh, in the world, everything else, enemy attacking. And now you're going over and that, or you learned a framework of putting yourself last and not giving yourself value, not giving yourself worth. And you're walking into a marriage and your cup is draining. How do we rewrite those attitudes, those values that were instilled in us? Because that's what therapy is all about. That my mom did this, my dad did this, I went through this trauma. We're working through the past to get to a better present. Your type of model, so I understand, is I'm in the present and it's sucking. I can't work out my past because that could take 27 years. I'm working through my present to get a better future. And that's what we also do at Learn and Live. How do I not roto-rooter my whole entire life wait 18 years for transformation, but take some of those attitudes and values and start shaping that by putting myself first.
It's a great question because, of course, our childhoods and our upbringing and our culture shape us so much. The the main modality that I use is inner child work, which means that we reparent ourselves. So when I feel that my husband doesn't notice me, he doesn't value me, he doesn't appreciate me, I do all this work around the house, or maybe I've dressed nicely, he hasn't noticed, and I'm having this deep feeling of being unseen. This is a very common experience for women, and it's one of the reasons we leave marriages. We need to feel seen, right? But we never felt seen as children either, which means that when our husband doesn't see us, not only do we feel hurt by him, but our whole history of being hurt is now being triggered and activated, right? And so, what I teach women is that you want to see yourself first. Again, this is part of putting yourself first emotionally. If you're waiting for your husband to give you something that you've never received, it's like you don't have the receptacle for it. Like, say you have a plug and a receptacle. If you've never received, I feel seen, I feel valued, there's no place in your body or your heart that can receive that message. It just doesn't exist. It's like not a reality for you. So when you sit with yourself and you go, and I did this work. So when I was a new mom, same thing, exhausted, feeling like crap. My house is a mess. I feel like I'm doing a terrible job, just criticizing myself. I started going, Shiloh, this is hard. Look at what all you've done. This is a lot. You're tired because you wake up or you sleep with your kids or you nurse around the clock. Like, that is honorable. I started validating and encouraging myself and acknowledging the things that I hadn't given myself permission to be valuable. I needed someone else to tell you it was valuable. I needed my husband to tell me it was valuable. And when I started doing that, my mood improved, my ability to receive love improved. And then I could even say to him, like, hey, I really need you to see this. I wonder if you see this. Do you appreciate this? And he would say, yes, of course I do. But it was too scary to ask that when I didn't even have a place that believed it was true in me.
I think that's probably one of the deepest seed needs that we have. Simon Sinek talked in an episode on the Diary of a CEO, great podcast. Go over and watch it. And I don't remember the Diary CEO guy's name, but I remember Simon Sinek, and he talked about one of the things that we lack, and this is more of a boardroom, but it will tie to the bedroom in a second. We are a visionless leadership state as of right now. And the thing that we're lacking the most is friendships. And marriage is the deepest friendship that we're supposed to have. But those first friendships that we're supposed to have with our parents, if you have faith, with our God, and those types of things, if you're not getting those, you're just taking that stuff now in the bedroom and expecting that person to become your functional savior. Me and my wife both did that back and forth. You're supposed to be my functional savior all 7 years. I'll gaslight you because this happened to me. I'll go minimize this on this. I won't go ask this on this. And the cycle just continued. The DNA of relationships, great book to read. Just, we kept going in the cycle of abuse. And I was the main provider of that, unfortunately. So I think that's key to understand that we have to go work out our first relationships out. So the most important relationship that we have now, outside of you have a faith, is that relationship, that tactile relationship, will not come forward if you're not doing that inner work. So I thought you really summarized that really well. So we're going to be getting into the other three parts, but not today. So as the audience going over and listening, like, oh, I want more. I'm like, no, we're going to be like a cow. I know it sounds offensive, but cows go over and chew on their cud. That's how they get strength. So we're going to give you a superhero challenge to gain some strength out of Shiloh's wisdom. So we have a superhero challenge for you. Is we want you to rack and stack yourself in your schedule. We're not asking you to do inner child work and everything else. That's Shiloh's job. You're more interested, go to the links. She also has a little teaser for you to deal with the 5 sabotages. She'll get into that in a second. But we want you to rack and stack yourself in your schedule this week and do something for yourself. Not just go on the phone and give yourself dopamine. Everybody does that. It doesn't matter. Moms, dads, kids, everything else. We know how to scroll. Come on. We know how to do it. Why don't you do something that's tactile, using your hands, using your feet, getting out of there. Shiloh is going to share a little bit about her offer, maybe give you like a couple ideas, and then we're going to close out the credits. But come back to our next episode, because this is just part 1, because the marriage doesn't get resolved just by you working on yourself. So So, Shiloh, you got the floor, and then we're going to close it out.
I love that you said that because people think healing your marriage on your own means just inner work, just changing yourself. That's the first step. Then I give you the relationship skills and the understanding to embody that and communicate that in your relationship. So, a little teaser I've got at the bottom here is the 5 ways that women can accidentally sabotage their relationships and what you can do about it. That's a free guide. You can download it from my site. And for your assignment this week, I want you to view yourself as your beloved child and what in your life is missing that you feel is draining you and your need is not being met. And do that, even if it's in a bite size 5-minute increment, do that for yourself. And if you feel guilty or you feel nervous, remind yourself that you are in service of your whole family when you fill your own cup.